welcoming me to your lecture hall. It's a real pleasure to visit Tôn Đức Thắng University. I also know we have some students in the audience from the Canadian International School. Thanks for joining us today, guys. I'm looking forward to a really great conversation this morning, and I want to get into it and leave lots of time for questions, so I'm going to keep my remarks fairly brief. I'd just like to start by saying what an honor it is for me to be here in Vietnam. I had an important discussion with civil society leaders, where we talked about some of the challenges facing Vietnamese society, including issues around freedom of expression. Now on this, as we know, Vietnam and Canada are very different countries, and we do disagree on certain things. But even when we disagree, our dialogue must always be respectful. And I really believe that we can move the needle forward by challenging each other to be better and to do better. And that's how we drive progress. The key to having a constructive relationship lies in finding common ground. So with that in mind, what do we share? Well, for one, Canada and Vietnam understand that in the modern world, with an ever-changing and globally influenced economy, we need to work with other countries. And the obvious and most persuasive example of this is trade. On this front, Canada and Vietnam are already very strong partners. Last year, we did over $5.5 billion worth of trade with one another, and that makes Vietnam our most important partner in the region. Yesterday, we signed a comprehensive partnership agreement that will allow us to work even more closely together on a number of issues, including trade and investment, development cooperation, and defense and security. And our people-to-people ties are especially strong. Canada is home to some 240,000 people of Vietnamese descent. But there is another area of common ground I'd like to delve into a bit more, one that we see so clearly today, the value that our two countries place on education. Now, I understand that there's a pretty impressive cohort of Canadian students here at the university. I hear you. Students who've chosen to pursue a quality education while studying abroad. And likewise, Canadian colleges and universities are brimming with scholars from Vietnam. As bright young students yourselves, you understand the importance of experiencing other cultures as a way of expanding your worldview. And of course, through education, you learn new ways of thinking and problem solving. But perhaps most importantly, going to school teaches you about respecting diversity. Diversity of opinion, yes, but also diversity as it relates to our defining characteristics, like our background, our gender, our religion, or socioeconomic status. In Canada, for example, we have a reputation as a pretty diverse and welcoming society. We're not perfect, but there is a certain level of openness to Canadians that people mention everywhere I go. And I really think that that openness and that welcoming spirit comes from, among other things, our focus on education. By getting more kids in classrooms and by empowering our youth to learn, form opinions, and voice those opinions respectfully, we've fostered a society that doesn't just allow for diversity and debate, we encourage it. So keep up with your studies, sign up for exchanges, take classes outside your faculty. And in doing so, I promise that you'll learn a lot more than just the content of a course. Now, I know we want to get into the discussion, so I'll close with this. Canada and Vietnam are partners. We have a relationship that is only getting stronger with time, and we must ensure that education remains a top priority going forward. You young people in this room, you may get told from time to time that you are the leaders of tomorrow, but I don't want people to tell you that anymore. I don't want you to think of yourselves as leaders of tomorrow, because this world, your communities, need you to be leaders today. What you do, the questions you ask, the actions you take in your school, in your community, at home, Show that young people are already leaders, thinking about the big challenges the world faces and the opportunity you have to be part of solving those challenges. The more you realize that you can't sit back and wait for other people to decide while you wait to grow old, but that your opinions, your input, your thoughtfulness, your energy, and your solutions are needed by your neighbors, your community, your country, and your world right now. Because you're not just citizens of any one country. All of us are also citizens of the world because we are so interconnected. And those are some pretty awesome responsibilities, but I know that if you stick with it, I guarantee your education and your engagement will pay off in more ways than you can imagine, not just for you, for all of us. So I'm incredibly excited about what the future holds for you. I'm very excited about getting started in this discussion. So thank you very much for your attention today. Look forward to our conversation.
It wasn't your first time. We've been waiting for you for 22 years. It's a nice break from the Canada winter. I thought it might be interesting to hear a little bit about that first trip. If you remember anything in your brain that really sticks out from that time, especially coming back after 2 decades.
Well, thank you. After I finished my undergraduate degree in Montreal at McGill, a group of friends and I decided that we should take a year and travel around the world. So we did a backpacking trip across Africa, and then we took a flight up to Moscow at Christmas time, got on the Trans-Siberian Express, took a train across to Beijing, traced our way down through China, then flew to Vietnam for 3 weeks. It was our timing was either very, very good or very, very bad, depending on your perspective, because we arrived right in time for TET in 1995. And everyone was traveling, everyone was going to see families. I remember a train ride from Hanoi south. We took an overnight train, and through the evening, every small village we passed through had fireworks going off. So for hours and hours, we just got to watch fireworks out the window of the train as everyone was celebrating. It was 1995, and I was absolutely enchanted by Vietnam, by the people I met, the people who invited me into their homes to be incredibly welcoming. We food, sang songs, got to know people, made pen pals, and we managed to actually keep up letters back and forth for at least a few months after we left. But it was an opportunity for me to really discover in a very simple way, traveling through in little villages and big towns from north to south, just how extraordinarily warm and welcoming Vietnam is. And I've said this a couple of times and people have laughed at me for it, but the welcome that I've gotten coming here as, okay, that outside, nobody did that for me last time, but what happened in terms of people being friendly and open and welcoming to me just as a traveler really showed the true spirit of Vietnam, and I see that welcome again in a more formal way as I'm here as Prime Minister, and it's really touching for me to see that this place hasn't changed in that regard, even as it has grown and modernized and created economic opportunities and innovation that has made a huge difference. So it's really exciting to both recognize what I saw 22 years ago, but also see how much it's grown.
Well, things have changed a little since then for Vietnam and for you, since your student days. So let's talk a little bit about Canada's leadership and global leaders. Yesterday was the one-year anniversary of a certain election back in the U.S. And, afterward there was this sort of feeling that the global order was not going to be the same anymore. Maybe it's time for another country to lead. And I wonder how you see Canada fitting into this. Each country has its approach. There's the Scandinavian social democratic economies, China's state planning approach. And so what is what's the Trudeau doctrine?
My doctrine is simple, just listen to Canadians. We are incredibly fortunate in Canada to be a country that has learned that diversity can and should be a source of strength, not a source of weakness, that different backgrounds, different stories, different people coming together can actually create a greater whole, more creative, more innovative, more solutions, which is really exciting. We're a country where you need to work hard to succeed, but you also need your neighbor to succeed if you want to succeed as well. And that approach has set us on a path of being a country that's never going to be the biggest or the most influential or the most dominant in military or economic or any various sphere, but that will always have something important to say, always have ways of making a difference and helping out. I think one of the things you talk about the dominance of certain countries in the past, and are we looking for someone else to be dominant? I think with a globalized world, the world you're all going to be growing up in, is going to be less about one person or one country being most influential and more everyone trying to figure out how they can help shape the world in ways that are positive and better. Canada is in a particular situation of having a neighbor that is much bigger than us, much more influential and dominant on the world stage. And we have always had to look for ways of being relevant that go to the quality of our contributions and the things that are uniquely ours. Similarly, if you think of the relationship between Vietnam and your neighbor to the north, China, obviously China takes up a lot of space economically in the region, but you've always been able to distinguish yourselves and seek your own approaches and build your own identity that draws on the successes of your neighbors, but also creates something that is uniquely yours. And I think in that way, and in so many ways, Canada and Vietnam can be very, very similar in the geopolitics that surround us, but also in our desire to carve out a positive, engaged identity in the region and around the world. I think I'd like to take a question. Now, I know some of you got to write down questions earlier from me. These are all nicely arranged, which means someone wants me to take the top, which is why I'm going to the bottom. It's all right. When I make a joke, you guys can laugh. You don't have to be so serious. Oh, there we go. The question is, I have known that you used to play boxing for charity. It's very special. Could you share why I did that? Yeah, a lot of people want to know why I did that. I grew up doing a lot of different sports and activities, including a number of different martial arts. And then when I got into my 20s and through university, I decided to take up boxing as a way of staying in shape. And a few years ago, before I was Prime Minister, before I was even leader of my political party, there was a charity boxing match where we raised money for charity, and I had a good time. It was a tough match, but it was a way for me of testing myself physically in a very serious way, when most of the tests in my life now that I'm in politics are more intellectual and less physical. So it was a chance to challenge myself in different ways and raise money for a good cause, and I was very glad to do it. I think the lesson and the metaphor in boxing is always about not how hard you can punch, but how hard you can get punched and keep going. We all take knocks in life. We all have setbacks. We all have difficult moments. And the measure of an individual is always how you accept that setback or accept that defeat or accept that punch and keep going and find your strength to persevere through difficult times. And that's something that I think is of value to anyone.
I wonder if what you were saying a couple minutes ago about the diversity that you embrace in Canada, if that has something to do with how relatively well the country's dealt with globalization and limiting to trade. I mentioned the U.S. election, and Canada didn't seem to have that kind of populist backlash that we were seeing there and in the UK. And so then you look at a country like Vietnam, which is pretty pro-globalization, pretty happy the way it's going. And so what's your take? How is Canada able to achieve that balance?
I think one of the things that I need to sort of set straight is Canada faces the same kinds of questions and stresses and worries that other people around the world face as well. Economic anxieties, worries about whether our kids are going to have good jobs, whether the future's going in the right direction, what we're going to do with climate change. There are always lots of concerns in any population. I think what happened in the election 2 years ago where I got elected is I was very, very focused on putting forward a positive vision that says, look, yes, we face challenges. Yes, the world is changing and the workforce is changing and there's more automation and there's more, there are more computers and robots doing jobs and there's offshoring of jobs and there's challenges in the way our economies are changing. But we can either be fearful and try and point fingers and close inwards, or we can pull together and realize that we can fix or solve this or succeed together. We can be optimistic about the future and say, yes, we're facing challenges, but we have faced greater challenges than this, and we can solve these if we work hard and focus on doing the right thing. But there were alternatives in the last election. There was a very nasty campaign against Muslim immigrants going on during their election at the same time. There are real challenges around economic anxiety. Canada's not perfect, not from a long stretch. We have a real issue around human rights of Indigenous peoples, that we haven't done a very good job over the past generations and even centuries of respecting and supporting and involving in the success of our country. So we have an awful lot of work to do at home, but instead of sort of pretending everything's all right or hiding from the problem or looking for someone else to blame, we're very much focused on trying to fix our own challenges and build better futures for everyone. So we've known always that trade can lead to economic growth, but at the same time, we recognize that sometimes the benefits of that trade only go to a very small number of people. And when we talk about trade deals now, we have to be thinking, okay, if these trade deals are going to create growth, which they do, we have to make sure that the benefits of that growth gets shared to everyone who works hard to contribute to it. And that hasn't always happened in the past, and that's why we're very focused when we look at trade deals. We just signed one with Europe, for example, that was very progressive and very positive because it's going to make conditions better for our workers and for our citizens and our small businesses. We're trying to renegotiate our North American free trade agreement in ways that will be positive for the three countries in North America. Of course, we're looking at expanding bilateral and multilateral trade deals here in Asia. Our various ministers are talking about the Trans-Pacific Partnership and what the future of that looks like. But we're very much focused on not just saying, oh, we need to sign trade deals because trade deals are good. We're focused on saying, can we make sure that the deals we sign, the outreach we make is going to be beneficial for everyone, for our own country and for our partners, because we don't believe that you have to have a win-lose scenario. We know that trade done right can be win-win for everyone within an economy, and we have to keep working on that, and that's sort of the approach that Canada has taken.
Well, on TPP, I'll choose one of the provisions as an example, intellectual property and drug prices. It sounds kind of specific, but it is kind of a chance to talk about, Canada's particular healthcare system, what Canadian values are in terms of the rights that citizens have. And so in the case of TPP, I think, it's being renegotiated this week, and the intellectual property provision is one of the big sticking points. And so for Canada, is it a matter of this provision making patents tougher and therefore raising the prices of drugs, which will make it unaffordable for Vietnamese or for other members of the trade deal?
Well, first of all, I'm not at the negotiating table right now. We've got our ministers working on that very carefully. But there's a number of things. Every country has certain things that it realizes really important. I mean, on the issue, for example, of the auto industry in Canada and in North America, if we're going to sign on to deals that open access for foreign cars at tariff-free rates in Canada, we should make sure there's a reciprocity so that the cars that we make in North America or in Canada can have the same access to the markets overseas. That's natural. On issues of culture, we need to make sure that we're protecting, particularly in the case of minority cultures like our Francophone culture in Canada, that we're protecting it. So there's a lot of things that we're looking at within the deal with a very simple lens, saying, is this going to be good for our citizens? Is it going to be good for our economy? Is it good for our country? Is it good for the world? And everyone knows I'm in favor of free trade. I think free trade is really important to create growth that benefits everyone. But we're going to make sure that whatever deal we sign is the right one. We're not going to sign a deal just because we feel pressured into signing a deal. We're going to make sure that it's right for Canada, it's right for the world, and we're in no rush to do that. So we're going to take our time and look carefully at negotiations. I will take another question. Could you please tell us about the hardest time in your life? How did I overcome it, and what did I learn from it? My father was Prime Minister of Canada when I was born, and he was Prime Minister for the first 13 years of my life. And I got to see firsthand what politics can have as a real impact on the world around you. And everyone would always ask me, oh, do you want to go into politics like your dad? Do you want to become a politician? And I'd always say, no, that's not what I want to do. I wanted to become a teacher. And I did become a teacher, because a teacher is really a way of making a difference in the world. But when I was in high school and approaching university, I struggled quite a bit with expectations. Not so much the expectations that my family put on me, although there were a few. Expectations that other people put on me. So, oh, you're Trudeau's son, you must be this, that, and the other thing, and therefore they expect me to be that. But most of them were expectations that I had for myself, where I had to be top of the class, and I wanted to go to the best schools, and I wanted to do the toughest programs, and I was going to succeed all the way just like my father did. The problem was I wasn't top of the class, and I even went through times when I was really struggling. And I had to realize that my path was not going to be the same one as my father's. That everyone's expectations on me that came from outside didn't matter as much as who I really was and what I was going to figure out. So I was focused on going to law school and succeeding at the top of the class the way my father did. And then I said, no, you know what, I'm going to take a different direction. And I studied literature, and I became a teacher. And I found my path, my way of having an impact on the world. But that moment of realizing that what I thought my future was going to be was not what it actually was, and feeling like I was letting my father down and feeling like I was letting myself down. So even if I didn't want to go into politics, I did want to succeed. I knew my dad wanted me to succeed, my mom wanted me to succeed, and instead I was struggling. And I had to figure out what really mattered to me and how to follow my own passion and develop my own abilities at my own pace. And I will tell you that if I hadn't had a time of breakdown and real soul searching, trying to figure out what the right path possibly was, if I hadn't gotten lost a little bit when I was younger, I never would have been able to get on the path that led me to being and serving the way I am today. Because me becoming Prime Minister, when my father was Prime Minister, was not obvious, not automatic, and it meant that I was always focused on, am I doing this my way, and am I figuring out what matters to me? My father was a politician because he was an academic and an intellectual and a lawyer. I came into politics as a teacher and a community organizer, and that approach, I think, was much more suited to me and to the success that I have right now. So knowing how to figure out your own path through difficult moments, understanding that we all have difficult moments, but using them as a way of figuring out your own path forward and what really matters to you is the most important thing in the hardest times we face in our lives, and we all do. But I faced lots of hard times in my life. I lost my little brother in an accident when he was only 23 years old. That was incredibly difficult, particularly for my parents. My father never recovered and mom struggled for years. There's lots of things we all go through that are really, really difficult. But how we find the strength to move forward and to figure out what really matters and dedicate our life to what matters to us and the people we love, well, that's at the center of what we all have to figure out as people.
Just want to go quickly back to that previous point you were making. You were mentioning protecting nature. And when we're talking about business, it's often about having a level playing field for domestic and foreign companies. But in the case of cultural business services, books, music, why is that different? Why do we have cultural exemptions?
Because culture is an extraordinarily important part of our economy. Obviously, how we tell our stories and Canada has a great body of literature and extraordinary media production companies and movies. But culture is more than just an economic good. Culture is how we define ourselves, how we define our identity, how we challenge ourselves. Great artists challenge us to think differently about the world we see every day. Can make us uncomfortable, can make us dream, can make us think about how the world could be, should be, shouldn't be. And making sure that every country is able to tell its own stories and celebrate its successes and share those stories with ourselves and with each other is extraordinarily important. Obviously, everyone knows the impact of Hollywood on movies. But it's important that every community and every country is able to tell their stories as well. That's why I believe in our local media, local TV stations, local writers, local newspapers. There is an opportunity, there has to be an opportunity to make sure that we are able to tell our stories to each other and tell our stories to the world. When you look at culture as just another economic box to be ticked off or filled, you're not understanding how important culture is in shaping the identity of a community and of a country. In Canada, we have 2 official languages, English and French. We are deeply informed by the indigenous people who helped shape living in North America for millennia. And we draw on people who share and tell stories from every corner of the world and come to be Canada, come to be Canadian. And protecting that and celebrating that is essential. I know there are people who want the world to become one big, flat, common place where everyone thinks the same and does the same, but that flies exactly in the face of what is most precious, which is diversity. I mean, in nature, you need biodiversity. You need different solutions living together, complementing each other. The same in a society. If you want to have a resilient community, you want to have a resilient and successful company or organization, you need men and you need women. You need people from different backgrounds. You need members of the LGBT community. You need members of minority groups. We need to recognize and celebrate the differences that mean that we all come at things from different perspectives, and culture remains a central part of that. That's why I always stand up to defend culture and defend the distinct voices which are so important to share everywhere around the world.
Is this importance of culture the reason TPP negotiators are revising this cultural exemption?
I'm going to take a question from these folks here, because the kids ask a lot of questions. And like I said, negotiators are negotiating with TPP. I'm going to talk to college and university students. I'm glad to be here. Turns out I have a question on the cultural exemption policy in TPP right here. Oh, no, I don't. Never mind. I'm just using it. Canada currently has an open immigration policy and quite a big number of immigrants. Does this big number of immigrants cause any issues, and how does it affect the economy and the society of Canada? It's a really great question. We're incredibly lucky in Canada because Canadians understand that immigration is a huge source of success and strength for our economy. We've had, over the course of our country's existence, many waves of immigration that have benefited our economy tremendously. And I'm here in Vietnam, I can't help but mention an extraordinary wave of immigration in the late 70s and 80s when people fled Vietnam and came to settle down in Canada. And they've contributed to growing our economy, creating stronger communities, but also making sure there is a diversity within Canada, people from different corners of the world with different experiences, who share those experiences and make them part of our collective experience as a country. The fact is, if you look at any country in the world, immigration is a net benefit. People arriving in your country don't take jobs, they create jobs. Because if you think about it, someone who's willing or chooses or is able to leave everything they've known, leave their home country, leave their extended family, and cross an ocean and start fresh and build a life and community for themselves there, that's the kind of person you want in your country. Someone who's ambitious, someone who's hardworking, someone who's willing to shape the world, to challenge everything, and to make and create success for themselves. Immigration has always been the secret to North America's success in so many different places around the world. And at the same time as the United States is sort of asking questions about continuing immigration, we know that giving people from around the world the opportunity to come and succeed in Canada, to start a family, to build a future, is going to be essential for our success and for the success of the world. Being open is actually one of the best ways to stay successful and stay safe as well. Learning from each other, being respectful of each other, instead of hating and pointing fingers, learning to accept differences, that creates the kind of community that can better handle the challenges, upheavals, and disruptions that are coming with the rapid pace of change that we have now around the world. So that's why I'm very excited about immigration, but it's also why Canadians are positive about immigration. We don't have any political party in Canada that is anti-immigrant. That's amazingly rare in Western democracies. And it happens because Canadians know that immigration is good. And one of my most important responsibilities as Prime Minister is to make sure that that stays true. Make sure the Canadians continue to understand it. And that's why we take security and rules very seriously when people come to Canada. That's why we have a rigorous immigration system that applies to everyone who comes to our country. But that's also why we have so much support for immigrants arriving in Canada, whether it's settlement services or health support or job services or language training or education. All these things are going to help someone succeed in the 21st century. We need to keep investing in so that future generations will continue to be as positive about immigration as we are today, because it will always be an important part of the future and present of our country and countries like it around the world.
I want to ask you about an issue that's very much going on in Canada, and that's climate change. You've probably heard many communities about how afraid they are of potential consequences. But at the same time, as a fast-growing economy, trade is very important to become. But some people are afraid of the trade-offs. If you have trade, are you sacrificing the environment? So how do you balance that?
No, that's a great question. Obviously, I can't start a question like that without expressing my sympathies and condolences for the terrible typhoon just a few days ago. The loss of life is always difficult, and my heart goes out to the families. One of the things we know with climate change is extreme weather events are going to become more and more common. Whether it's floods or droughts, whether it's typhoons or hurricanes, these kinds of things are going to be more and more common. And we have to figure out how to defend ourselves against that, how to become more resilient, stronger in our communities, but also how to prevent these extreme weather events from getting too much worse. But fundamentally, people get that there is not a choice to be made between the environment and the economy. You can't pretend that you can only have one or the other. We have to build a future that is both thoughtful about our environmental responsibilities and creating job growth and innovation and abilities to actually manage and minimize the impact of environmental change on us. So getting those two things together means being really thoughtful about the long term. Because you can't pretend that something could be good for the economy and bad for the environment, and genuinely be good for the economy, unless you look at it in an incredibly short-term and narrow way. Because if something is bad for the environment, well, then it's going to affect the economy. The air we breathe, water we drink, food we put into our bodies, the green spaces we try to raise our kids in, whether they're parks or drives to the countryside, farms that we rely on to feed us. These kinds of things we have to be thoughtful about for the long term. That's why Canada is one of those countries that we're really cold in the winter, we're really hot in the summer, so we need both heating and air conditioning. We have a really big country with lots of distances between our various communities, so we're always going to spend a lot of energy on transportation. And we have significant fossil fuel resources, so that's a challenge around climate change. So it would be easy for us to say, oh, you know what, it's too hard to lead on climate change. It's too hard to figure out how to move forward. But Canadians aren't like that. We know that we can innovate. We know that we can solve these challenges. We can get better at how we use the energy sources we have. We can invest in and innovate around the next energy solutions, whether it's solar or wind or geothermal or something that hasn't even been invented yet. We know that we have to be thoughtful and responsible about how we're building the future, because it's not a choice to make between environment and economy. There's no trade-off there. People are right to say, no, I want to live in an environment that is protected and healthy, while at the same time, I have a good job and the next generations are going to have good jobs, and we together need to figure out how to do that. And that's exactly why, for example, Canada signed on to the Paris Agreement, which includes almost over $2.5 billion in development support for countries that are grappling with the challenges and impacts of climate change and creating better energy sources. So climate change is the defining issue of our time, and we either choose to step up and lead and figure it out, because as it's a challenge, it's also an opportunity, or we try and hide our heads in the sand and wait for the next generation to actually deal with it. Well, the longer we wait, the more difficult it'll be to deal with, which is why we have to deal with it now.
But a lot of the audience, what would be relevant for a lot of them is back to what you were saying about education. And you're familiar with how a lot of these students will end up in Canada and elsewhere to study abroad and diversifying their experience. But what about bringing that back home?
You know, a number of years ago in Canada, we had a real concern that our best and brightest were leaving the country to go study overseas to get jobs in Silicon Valley, in Europe, in places like Singapore or Tokyo, and that was true. But at the same time, we're starting to realize a lot of them are coming home. People will go away and learn and work and grow, and then choose to come home. And what they need in order to be able to come home is not the decisions people make are not always wrapped up in where the best salary is. It's often wrapped up in, well, where's the best quality of life? Where is it that I want to start a family? Where is it that I want to feel like I can make a difference in my community and live a good life? The choices we make in our life about where we want to live and how we want to live don't come down to, well, where's the best salary. I mean, that's sometimes part of it. It certainly is part of it. But there's a lot of things that make one place attractive or make it home rather than another. And a country like Canada, a country like Vietnam, which is so particular and unique with a strong sense of identity, we'll always have people wanting to come home. I met with a number of business leaders who grew up in Canada and have moved back to Vietnam because their parents and grandparents used to be here before they moved to Canada, and are being that bridge between Canada and Vietnam in a very successful way. And those stories happen all around the world. So I will say absolutely, you should look for opportunities to travel around the world and discover new places, challenge yourself, and learn new things, but always be open to bringing what you learn back to your community, bringing what experiences you have to put them in service of the country and the world you want to build. And not everybody will, and some people will come back and bring with them a family. But those kinds of experiences and that kind of global citizenship that we're seeing much more openness to in this generation than ever before is very, very exciting. So I'm not worried about brain drains. I'm worried about creating opportunities to be successful in Canada. Whether you're Canadian, immigrant to Canada, or you're a student who comes to Canada, I know that we can compete with anyone around the world in terms of quality of life. And that's the focus that Vietnam should continue to have. What are the things that make this place so special to you? Celebrate those, emphasize those, and encourage you young people to go and discover the world and then come home. What do I feel when I come to Vietnam? What do I intend to do to promote the friendship between Canada and Vietnam? I think we all have things to learn from each other. We all have opportunities to grow together. Like I said, Canada already sees Vietnam as our top trading partner in Southeast Asia, and it gives a strong foundation that we can continue to build on. But there are so many things that we have in common. I remember when I came to Vietnam in the mid-90s, I felt like I was back home. When I walk into a shop, if it was a young person there, I'd speak to them in English. If it was an older person there, I'd speak to them in French. And because there were a lot of people who spoke French in the generation back in the 90s. So understanding the diversity of cultures, the challenges of the past, but reflecting on how to be ambitious and forward-thinking in the present is a challenge that Canada faces, a challenge that Vietnam faces, and one that we can do a better job facing together. I have a tremendous amount of affection and hope for this country. I think there is an opportunity here to succeed, not just in the region but around the world, that I very much want Canadians to be part of. I want Vietnam to consider Canada as a friend, a partner, an ally, as we have been in the past. Historically, we were there as member countries on the two post-war conferences. Canada was a friend to Vietnam during very difficult times, and we will continue to be a friend to Vietnam through difficult and mostly good times in the future. I think that's really important to say.
Well, like you mentioned, there's a lot in common, a lot different about the two countries, and as the economies do get closer over the years, where do you see opportunity? Where do you see that going? It's just interesting that there's such different countries brought to the TDTU and some of the agreements that you discussed with the Vietnamese counterparts in Hanoi. So where do you see this relationship going?
I think there's tremendous potential. I think Vietnam has a history wrapped up in its relationship with China, and certainly recent history a few decades ago with the United States. There are traditional relationships and challenges that Vietnam has always had, but I think it's not necessarily hedging a bet, but diversifying, understanding that building relationships with a country like Canada, where we don't have as much baggage on the history, where we have a true tradition of friendship and partnership, is a great opportunity for Vietnam. And on the flip side, as Canada looks to engage more and partner more in the great growing economies of Asia, Vietnam can be a very good place to begin to engage. All different countries in the region have different advantages and opportunities, but I think the scale and the potential of the Canadian-Vietnamese relationship, and quite frankly, the potential of Vietnam as a country is extraordinarily exciting. It's a country to watch. You're a country to watch in the coming years. You've made tremendous strides just over the past few decades in creating economic benefits for citizens, lifting the quality of life for millions upon millions of people out of poverty into the middle class. These are really great signs that are going to be at the center of the challenges of the 21st century in a technologically driven, people-centered world. I'm really excited about the potential here in Vietnam, and I'm looking forward to coming back much more often than the 22-year interval that I have set up as a first thing.
Thank you, Tommy.
What's my best advice for Vietnamese students to be global citizens when we now enter the fourth industrial revolution? Education, knowledge, innovation, openness to different ideas, different ways of doing things, courage, fearlessness. Actually, which are two different things. I'd say courage rather than fearlessness. Because being courageous isn't not being afraid. Being courageous is being afraid and doing it anyway. And we need to be brave in this world. The pace of change, the disruption that's going on all around us, means that we're each of us going to have to be fierce controllers of our own education. We're going to need to be lifelong learners. You're going to, what you are learning here, you're learning lots of subject matter, which is really important, but mostly you're learning how you learn. Because no matter what you learn here, you're going to have to update that 5 years from now as the world changes, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. You're going to have to constantly be learning to use new technology, new skills, new ways of doing things. So as you recognize that the world is changing and being challenged, you can either try and fight it or you can ride it. You can choose to be part of thinking differently about the world, about challenging the status quo. Okay, it's always been done this way. Well, it doesn't necessarily always need to be done that way in the future. Is there a better way of doing things? Is there a more efficient way of doing things? Are there more creative solutions you can bring forward? Everyone talks about the importance of science, technology, engineering, and math. Absolutely. STEM is going to be key to success. Understanding the scientific method, having strong math skills, knowing how to be powerful users of technology, knowing how to code, knowing how to program. I might be the first prime minister in history who knows how to code in C++. I don't use it anymore, I'm super rusty. But knowing how to think that way and have an algorithm approach to solving certain problems is really, really useful. But at the same time, even as we develop on the scientific side, we're seeing computers and automation do a better job of that as well. We also have to be developing on the art side. How we tell stories, how we paint pictures, how we inspire each other, how we connect with each other, how we grow and evolve as individuals, as communities, what makes us happy, what makes us sad, how to support your neighbor while you're supporting yourself. These kinds of things are what the next decades are going to be all about. That balance of figuring out both science and beauty at the same time. And how each of you figures out your path within that. How much to learn from books, how much to learn from experiences. How much to learn by going through a course, how much to learn by trying it for yourself. Staying attuned to your own potential and your own capacity, and knowing that the pace of change is going to keep accelerating. And as soon as you figure out something, you're going to have to start working on the next thing you have to figure out. But being excited and inspired by that, the challenges and opportunities we face. This is what the future holds for all of you, for all of us. But if you face it with flexibility, optimism, positivity, and even excitement, looking at, oh boy, I don't know what's around the corner, this is going to be fun, is the kind of attitude that we really should be striving for. Because it's a big world here. And each of us gets to shape it with our actions. And I want you to be inspired by what you know you can accomplish.
On this technological change,
don't even make reference to the internet, that haven't understood the way the world is changing. And laws, just because they take time to get passed and written and debated and put into place, will always be a little bit behind the pace of change. So government has to be very attentive, very connected in, very much listening to citizens and businesses and organizations that are saying there's a challenge here, we need a solution there, all those sorts of things. But at the same time, as a government looks at its responsibility to serve its people well, which means giving citizens the capacity to succeed, to build success for themselves, for their community, for their family, for their country. Government has to think about what those tools are. Fundamental tool is, of course, education. Making sure that high-quality education is available to as many people as possible. It's investing in the school system that gives young people the right tools. Investing in post-secondary education, which is going to make them able to compete on the world stage. But also looking at how we're training workers right now, or maybe mid-career, and realize that the coming automation or offshoring or disruption in the workplace is going to put them in danger of losing their job. Well, how do we give them opportunities to develop new skills that will keep them engaged in working well and supporting their family. At the same time, as a government, how do we invest in science, technology, innovation to be part of the creating of new solutions? And Canada is one of the world leaders in artificial intelligence right now because governments invested in some of the smartest people in the world to work really hard on trying to figure out new ways of doing things. And businesses do a lot of investing in research and development, but they have to feel like there's going to be a return on their investment, in a few years. Governments can sort of say, we're going to invest in science because we think it'll pay off a generation from now, or 50 years from now. So being able to think at that scale and encourage innovation, science, empower our citizens, and create a sense of confidence within our citizens that we are able to build a brighter future by working all together instead of by pointing fingers at each other. I think that's the role that government has, and that's the role that I'm very much focused on.
I'm sure everyone here would like to say thank you for making a point to sit down with Vietnamese people and young students and spend some time with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all your questions.